Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome to Enforcing the Fundamentals with Doug Harding. I'm Matt, sitting here, obviously with Doug, because it would be a very lame show if you're asking me for coaching advice. Doug, we took a week off. I had a week off. I needed to decompress. It was not intended. It's just I just shut her down for a week, basically, is what happened after 3 or 4 days of running around the Pacific Northwest and hitting some events. What were you up to that week off we had? Did you get anything special done? Did you get out to the rink? Anything at all?
No, didn't get out to the rink, but we have another little. Well, my wife's other business is she's a glass artist and she does glass manufacturing, and it was a little cold last year, so we built a new building. So we
Oh,
ordered
nice.
a steel building, and we have a very close friend and a partner now with the business, and we went and built a 60 by 10-foot steel building that's to be insulated and all the electricity and water put in it, and nobody has to freeze while they're working on glass this year.
Well, that would be, I'm against frostbite. If you could avoid it, that would be cool. It's one of those things. It's not super high on the list. Like my firm's rule is no plummeting. That's number one, top of the list. But yeah,
Yeah,
no
that might
frostbite is top 10
pretty.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, my new arena here. There's lots of frostbite that goes along. So yeah, we're kind of
Yes.
waiting for the cold weather to hit, and we can run about 30 feet down the bank and shovel a little snow and sprinkle a little water, and we'll have ourselves our NHL size arena.
Well, that's going to be
I get to
fantastic.
practice on it a lot.
That's what's great, and we're looking forward. We'll hopefully get some videos and maybe some video clips of some tips and tricks to go along with our conversations.
That would be
So we
good.
are live tonight. I am going to stream this directly to the Facebook. So if you're out there and you're watching us, feel free to chime in, get your questions in as we go along. Had a few questions pop up last week, and I promised I would ask them. Um, the very first one is sort of going to lead into our topic today, which is off ice problems affecting on ice performance. And how do you deal with that as a coach? And not, again, it's not just strictly for players. We are going to be talking about coaches have problems too. I mean, especially in the minor hockey level, you have a full time job, they don't pay you for that. So life creeps in where life creeps in. However, um, the very first question I got was, what about the kids whose performance suffered because they've had to move away from home and end up very homesick? I know we addressed that when we were talking to Danny a few weeks back. And Danny has had a special situation. You can check that out in our archives, but he was 15 years old, went from northern Alberta to Vancouver Island, and then was put in a school where none of his teammates were going. Have you encountered in your years of bringing kids in from out of town the homesick bug?
Yeah, almost all of them. If they're first year, if you're getting a player traded in who's an 18, 19, or 20-year-old, then and I tried not to do very many trades. I tried to stay right with whatever I chose at the beginning of the year. We can talk about that later. That's unusual, but the kids, especially in that first year in Cowichan, we had 7 or 8 kids that were like very, very young. Dean Evison was a 16-year-old, and Jeff Courtnall and Russ when he was there for a little bit at the beginning, and Danny Hodgson and Rick Nasham. I mean, Rick turned out to be a Hall of Famer at University of Saskatchewan, or hockey
Mm-hmm.
player Regina, and they all come away and they're like I was. I went away at 15 to play junior hockey. And then because I ignored school, the next year, my parents and my grandmother uh, got together and sent me off to Kings, which turned out to be really good, but I was pretty disappointed. I was homesick when I was away and led to some habits that I'm glad I didn't continue when it was junior hockey. I mean, most of the guys that I was with were older guys, and they were going from practice, to the pool hall. They weren't going to school,
Hmm.
and I would just rather have trotted along to the pool hall, and that's why my parents said, "No more junior hockey. That's it. You're out of junior hockey. You're not going to school." And again, I was really upset by that, but in the long run, it got me a greater education and some educational opportunities as well. But I was really not so much the junior because I wasn't there long enough once they found out I was skipping school. Um, but with the at King's, it was hard. Um, I mean, I sort of was a little bit used to moving because we moved almost every year when I was growing up. My dad was in the army, and I
Hmm.
mean, we saw Edmonton and Calgary and and Barrie and oh God, we saw so many London and Kingston and Petawawa, and I mean, I saw them all, and so didn't have the opportunity to set up long-term friendship, but I would imagine kids that were in a more stable position than even me would have felt it more, and I felt it, like being away from mom and dad, you know, uh, whatever situation that is, it can be hard to live with being away, eating, with different people, having to follow the rules of the house and not the rules maybe that you're used to, and but yeah, it's a hard situation. In Danny's case, I knew pretty quick right away. I mean, his billets were complaining about, all he does is moan and do this and do that. And I'm going like, he's 15 years old.
Hmm.
He's away from home for like the first time ever. And having talked to his parents, it was a very close knit family. So that
Hmm.
was even harder. But I mean, uh, all of the players, all of the young players, for a certain amount of or a certain period of time will feel homesickness. So you can't leave them alone too long. You try to do team building stuff where you get them together more often with at least the hockey players that they see. It's not just practice and workouts. You get try to do things like going bowling,
So
which
you
was a
kept him away
favorite
from
of
the
mine.
pool hall, though, would be my guess.
You try to keep them away from the pool hall because most of the pool halls are in bars. So
Yes,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
and yeah, some of the 19,
And
20
it's
year olds don't think that that's so much fun, but you know, um, it's you're trying to build habits, and the habit you don't want them doing is visiting the bars. Oh, coach, I just played pool, and but I set up a. You got me?
yeah.
I lost the picture. Ha!
No,
There I
you're
am.
still here. You're fine. That's a you
Okay.
problem. We're good
Uh,
on this end.
okay. Anyway, my first couple of years as a coach, I would go around and talk to most of the bars and offer them tickets if they would either tell me or kick them out. So if they didn't want to kick them out and create a ruckus, then they wanted some tickets. They had to tell me, and I'd confront them right away. Hey,
Mhm,
we have a rule, and the rule is that the 20-year-olds they kind of object to that because they're used
mhm.
to going out at home with their friends. They've
Well,
already
they're 20.
graduated high
It's
school,
yeah.
and you're treating me like a kid. Well, you know what? For me, I'm 900 years old. You are a kid. But, yeah, it's always a problem. You don't know what they're gonna respond to that will make that feel better. In Danny's case, yeah, conversations I had with his mom and conversations I had with him and trying to keep him busy. But like I said, other than practice time, he was completely separate from the team
Mhm.
until I changed his billets and put him in with, one of the other hockey players. So, and billeting is a problem too. So you have,
Absolutely, which brings us to another question we had. Let me just make sure I word it correctly. Yes. Um, so Joe in Williams Lake would like to know if you recall the mini camp in July or August and a bunch of the billets crapped out and you brought home quote unquote a few players to stay with us in Victoria. This would be about 1979, well, I guess
88,
81 is what I'm
80,
looking at.
81 was the year. Yeah.
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 Do you
Not
remember
only
this one? Joe's curious.
yeah, hey Joe. Yes. Not much just in terms of curiosity. We had set up a camp, and we were going to be doing this camp, and we I had assumed that through our billet captain, billets were being set up, and everything was being arranged, and like 3 days before the camp actually opened up, I found out that the billet captain, when I called to find out, have we got weekend places for the kids to stay, and I was informed, because I couldn't contact them, that they were away. They were gone off on holidays. So I ended up putting a lot of pressure on my house, and
Mhm.
we ended up with 22 junior hockey potential kids staying at my house, 22. So we ate up our floor space, our upstairs bedroom space. We ate up a lot of space. But you know what was really fun about that? Coming back from the arena and the workouts and the interviews and the little bit of stress that they were feeling, new kids trying to make teams, and actually I had some returning players who were not from the area who also came, because it's always nice to have some veterans in camp so you can run comparisons, or so that the kids can compare themselves to them. We had a few of those too. And we ended up playing street hockey and doing all kinds of stuff. But I can remember that there was a couple of kids from the local block who joined the
Mhm.
street hockey game of the 22 kids that were staying with me at my place. And your younger brother ended up strapped to the chest of a future NHL hockey player while they were playing street hockey, because I think Greg was
Um,
only about one
yeah,
for
he
all
was
of them.
according to my research here, he was 5 months old. He
5
wasn't
months
he
old.
he
Okay.
was
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yep.
July, August, yeah, that's about right. We're looking at 5,
Yep.
6 months. I'm not going to stooge off his birthday, but yep,
Mhm.
that's 5 months old. I would have been a little over 3, looking down the barrel of 4, 22
Yeah.
billets. And how
The
long did
hard
this
part was
last
that
exactly?
we hadn't planned for that, so we had to feed 22 kids about 8 meals. So, yeah, there was a lot of scrambling off to grocery stores and whatnot, and who's it's for. In those days, we were all pretty foolish as owners and coaches, though, because we used to pay for camps.
Mhm.
So my grocery bill that for that weekend was about the biggest grocery bill I had ever seen.
I'm sure in 81 it was probably massive. It is probably about the size of what I'm trying to feed 4 kids on over here these days, but yeah,
Mhm.
22 kids. And who exactly was, decided that the 5-year-old needed to be the
Well,
the early model GoPro?
we'd known this player for a while. He was just a great, great kid. He got to go and play in the NHL, and he's still very, very heavily involved in the NHL. And
Okay, that narrows it down to j
Greg kinda took to him,
Mhm.
and when we were out playing in the street, Greg was whining and yelling and hollering, and so Daryl came over and
That's who it was.
strapped him to his chest and played street hockey. I said, "Daryl, you can't play goal with, Greg strapped to the front of you, but, you're welcome to keep playing."
It's 1981.
Yeah.
Whatever. Give the kid a cigarette and a beer and put him in goal with the strapped to Daryl.
Yeah.
Oh
So,
my
yeah,
god. Oh,
lots
that's
of fun
that's
in those
fantastic.
camps. Those
Yeah.
camps are really fun for me because I get to know, it's kinda almost a brain overfeed, but you get to know a whole lot of kids that you, other than their stats and the fact that they want to come to camp and they want to be a part of your organization, you get to know them. And billeting 22 of them, you get to learn some of the habits that maybe you wouldn't have even liked to have learned. But it's a whole eye-opening experience in terms of getting to know the kids, and that's always a good thing when you're building a team. The more
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know about an individual.
you mentioned a few episodes back that getting to know the kids before setting the team was pretty crucial. So I would imagine that running these camps really helped sort of get your head straight around um, who was meshing with who
Yeah.
was putting in the effort. Because I mean, these camps, you're talking July, August, so this is all preseason stuff. So if their head's not in the game of I got to get ready for the season, I would imagine that would affect some decision making skills.
Well, yeah, the more you know about them, I think the better your choice might be in terms of picking the kind of players that you want, or the kind of players that you might think might blend well with players that you already have. Um, it's pretty important. And I used to do a funny thing is I used to run around. I was always at the registration table. I wasn't a coach hiding upstairs. I was at the registration table, and I used to just like to blurt out just completely silly things while I'm at the
Mm-hmm.
registration table. Hey, well, you a Boston fan, or and it was nothing to do with what the real answer was, but
Mm-hmm.
more observation for what type of person the kid was. If the kid was upset because I called him a Boston Bruin and he's a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, then that
Okay.
gives you an idea, a little bit of look into who he is. Or if he laughs that off, again, it gives you a different everything that they have to say. When I was sitting at registration camp, and I used to, without interviewing and setting up any time, run around and talk to them all. That whole weekend, I mean, in 25 minutes, I knew what kind of hockey player they were. But in a 3-day camp I wanted to know what kind of person they were. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of guys don't do that, and then they make choices that they wish they hadn't made. Not that I haven't made some of those too, but it narrows it down. If our personalities in a player in a 5-minute conversation about, hi, how was your trip? You know, how's your dad? How's your mom? How's your sister? How's your brother? Coming from such and such a place, how are you liking it here? What have you seen? Have you been out anywhere here? And I mean, within 3 or 4 minutes of talking, and I spent at least 3 or 4 minutes talking to every kid in camp before we made
Mm-hmm.
cuts, and as much of that time as I could in the first day.
Right.
Again, because everybody had come in nervous. I tend to be a little goofy, so that can be relaxing. I can be hard too. Oh
I'm
gosh,
aware of both sides of that
who'd
coin.
know?
Yes. Yeah. Um,
But
it's
you
it.
know what? You want them all to perform the best that they can, which comes back to what we were talking about today, is the homesickness part. You know,
Mhm.
um, and then the other part is a new player on the team, and he's there, and he doesn't really blend very well with the other players on the team. Or he's a runaround and he'll pick a group of guys to jump into and just tag along. I mean, I really like to see a kid be as part of the group, but as independent as he possibly can be.
Right. So I'm curious. You mentioned team building and getting to
Mhm.
know the players. That street hockey game you're talking about, were you standing out there and taking advantage of that? I
I
mean,
was
obviously
playing.
it's not the best team building because it's not really a team. But
No.
at the same time, it's bonding. It's fun, and their personalities are going to show through there. You really, really see the personalities of people once you get involved in a friendly game, and you watch how it evolves. The competitiveness is going to come out. The personalities, the win loss sort of feelings, the
Yeah.
sportsmanship, it all comes out. I mean, I blew my knee out at 20 years old playing touch football because everybody's competitive came out, and one dude's attitude problem came out, and everybody was like, yeah, you're gonna get got. And there was just a couple of people, and me included, that were gonna get him. He made us look stupid, and long story short, I blew my knee out, which still bothers me to this day. So I would imagine this is an incredible opportunity, not only to get out of the house, where I would guess, given by the tone of the question I got, your wife was probably not super impressed with the situation right off the bat. Um,
She's
so
a
we're
trooper.
Oh, she is. Don't get me
She
wrong.
fed him,
I'm
and
not.
she made many trots off to the grocery store because the grocery store was only 2 blocks away.
Yep.
Uh, you figured 5 boxes of cereal would be a good start. It wasn't it wasn't even close. And, so you bring back 5 boxes of cereal for breakfast and then find out you're 5 boxes short, so to run back to the grocery store again. But, yeah, it was, it was a interesting experience, that's for sure.
But it's so. But the point I was trying to make is, were you able to take advantage of that as I get a stroke of luck? I mean, you can get in there and see these kids that
Mhm.
are showing up for the camp, some of which you are clearly looking at as, what are we going to do with you next season? Was that some sort of thing that sort of shine a light on
It
decisions
was
that were going to be made? Or, like, you were big on work ethic, like, how are they going to handle that? Did any of that stand out with that particular game?
oh, yeah. On the street hockey game,
Yes.
guys who would pass the ball, guys who wouldn't pass the ball, guys who would, instead of nicely, or not nicely, competitively going over and trying to take the ball away, or guys that went over and ran somebody over into the, it told me a lot. You know,
I
I after that I used to run when we got close to like team size. I know we used to do this with major midget hockey too. I was just helping coaching, but they used to run a camp for 3 days that involved very little ice. It was all games, and it was all, it was more like a summer camp, not a hockey camp. And it tells you, there's some real personality traits that will come screaming to the forefront when you get into those situations. And I
Yes.
thought that road hockey game and all the other stuff, talking before, taking registration, talking to each of the individual kids, and was critical in making very, very close, tight decisions as to what type
Mhm.
of player you wanted to have or not have. Like I said, you can put them on the ice in 20, 25 minutes, run a few drills in a scrimmage, and yeah, I generally have a pretty good idea of what kind of hockey player he is. Now, where was his attitude going to be? Like, was he going to be able to, when it got tough, was he just going to pack it in, or when it got tough, he got more competitive and played harder? Those kind of things. Those kind of things. That's what I think minor hockey coaches miss a little bit. They get
Mhm.
150 kids trying out for a hockey team, and in the first hour they cut 50. In the second, day, in the first hour they cut another 50. And boy, now we're down to 50. But you know what? In my experience, I always missed players
Mhm.
in minor hockey. Going back to the goaltender situation
Mhm.
that we talked about really, really early in it. But I always felt there were players that I missed. So, you know, for me, I used to watch those players who didn't quite make it because at that time, for what I knew and what I thought I was going to need, or I generally cut kids in those close situations on attitude. And sometimes that's just they're very, very over competitive,
Mhm.
especially in I'm trying out and I've been wanting to make this team for a year. You know, last year I wanted to be on it. This year I've got to be on it because I don't have another chance at this age group. And those, I always felt, and I always knew that there were kids that probably should have been on those teams that weren't.
Hmm.
because of I didn't know enough about them at the time, and that's hard. I've even had parents come back and complain to me and say, my kid, is one of the best players on the ice. And I said, yeah, he's a very good hockey player, but in minor hockey tryouts, there are 17 rep players on the ice and 100 players on the ice who aren't.
Hmm.
So you can't just do okay or look good. You've got to be outstanding. It's not like you're playing against 100, other top rep hockey players. So it's hard for. And I think that there are more and more research being done in minor hockey by coaches who intend to return that are trying to pick their teams for next year,
Hmm.
almost more so than dealing with their team for this year, which again, it can be a good thing for next year, but generally will turn out to be problematic for this year.
Yeah, understandable. You're putting you're thinking of a whole season ahead, and you're completely ignoring that you have a whole season ahead. Like
Yeah.
you by the end of this season, you might have had enough for one reason or the other, and you've just wasted a lot of brain time thinking about what you're going to do next year. And you're just like, I swear to God, if I have to deal with this one more, no, I'm done.
Hmm.
It's it that live in the moment. It's plan for what's in front of you because I mean, especially if you're looking at something where you got to kind of perform to get there. I mean,
Hmm.
you can plan ahead all you want, but I mean, we've seen some coaches um, that are not cut out for coaching. They get a little too, let's say, invested in the outcome and end up spending a little more time waiting in the parking lot for the game to end rather than being on the bench. And
Yeah.
they're probably not cut out to be on the bench in the first place, but much like how I got roped into coaching baseball one year, it's they had the time, they were there for their kid, and they had enough skill to help out, whereas a lot of other people didn't. However, push come to shove, maybe not cut out to be the bench boss. Um,
Yeah. You know, it's like kids get through or you miss kids.
mhm,
You know, in the case of coaches, I know minor hockey spends a lot of time trying to make sure that they have the best people possible that they can,
mhm,
and they pick the people, and you know, it's the same as picking a team. They're a coaching team for your minor hockey association. There are going
mhm.
to be some good ones and some bad ones. There's people who interview very very well, you
Yes.
know, and but when it comes down to performance, it's not there, or knowledge, it's not there, or experience, it's not there. I don't
Mhm.
know how much knowledge I have, but I have a lot of experience now.
And sometimes that goes a little hand in hand with each other. It's like I got a lot of experience. I don't know what works, but I can tell you the 300 things that I did not work out well for me. So we're going to
Mhm.
steer away from those and we'll try. You might try something new. You might try something somebody's get tipped up, but you have the experience to go, yeah, that didn't work last time. New game plan.
Yep.
And you do it long enough and you eventually come up with methods. I mean, some sooner than others, but that's really the goal. Let's get back to our subject here.
Yep.
Life happens throughout the season.
Mhm.
Hockey is not a short season, especially
No.
if you are dealing with that rep level or you're in the stages of getting into that major junior level or college level, uh, on the path to make those next few teams to where you are getting paid for it. It's not a short season at all. I mean, we're probably talking August to May for some people. Some people they find a way to play all year round, even
Yep.
if it's, they got a pickup game just so that they're in on ice shape. Um, life happens in that. Even if we're talking, let's just say October till April, that's a
Mm,
big stretch for
yeah, it
life to
is.
happen. You are when you're dealing with the major, junior, and the minor hockey level, we're talking high school kids. And we talked about that on our, several episodes where a you know what, I'm not even going to say a boy, a teenage girl, because
Mhm.
female hockey has become a huge thing. And, it's become one of those things where we don't hear a lot about it, but boy, howdy, when the Olympics roll around, the country is way behind the Canadian women's team, all
Mhm.
over it.
Mhm.
Um, and
That's
you've
why I
you've taught,
wish their new professional league success because,
yes, absolutely.
it's
I
their
mean,
time
it's
for it. I coached women's hockey for a couple of years and even got to be the head coach for the province, and those were some of the most not only fun, but some of the best learning years that I had. Like,
Mhm,
I always say I like to learn from my players, but learning from the girls that I had opportunities to work with. I mean, I've got girls that have gone to Harvard and Yale and Wisconsin, and that they've done very well in terms of getting educational opportunities for them. I even have one girl who's in the NHL head office and has been
mhm.
since she graduated Harvard. So
That's
now I
quite a
think she
pedigree.
would have loved to have played a little longer. And I think there's now more opportunity for women because the only opportunity was the Olympic hockey team.
Yes.
So for 22 women in this country, every fourth year, they got, what the guys get all the time.
Yeah.
And to see it
And let's
developing
and
like
let's
this, I'm
not
a big
let's not
supporter.
sugarcoat it either. I
Hmm.
mean, women's hockey is lacking one thing that men's hockey has in spades: a paycheck.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
get to a certain, there isn't, and you see this in the WNBA. The WNBA is a punchline to a lot of people. However, these women have gone out there and they are able to do the same thing the men are doing. And it's not a game that requires a lot of physical, smashing around. It's You can watch as good of a game in the WNBA or the new women's hockey pro hockey league as you can watching the men. The difference is the amount of money that's been put into it to make it a spectacle and the marketing budget. It's
Yeah.
no different than watching a good NFL game and a good college football game and a good CFL game.
Well, it's all about entertainment, and it's what the
Yes.
fans want. And you know what? The fans are looking less at, I'm hoping, women's hockey as women's hockey. They're looking at it as a very high skilled, uh, very involved athlete,
Sure.
willing to dedicate themselves. And I mean, the women have been dedicating themselves to be the
Mhm.
best that they can be for 20 years, but it has gone literally unrecognized because they got to work at Safeway
Yeah.
on the counter to be able to play. And
Yep. And
I think this is so great, and that it's only 6 teams now, but I hope it grows to be 30. I
you know
hope
what? The
that there are
NHL
lots
started
of
with six
women that
teams,
want to. Yep,
right? Like
that's
the
right.
NHL started with six teams.
Yep,
So, I mean, I would like to see it where it's not women's hockey, it's just hockey,
hockey. Yeah.
personally. Um, I again, big pro wrestling fan, and it's not about that, but 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even longer now, if I were to go back and really start digging into it, um, they started giving the female talents better time in ring to do things, and it has snowballed into the fact that they had them close WrestleMania before. They are regularly the best match on the card. They have women that are out there performing at a high level, drawing money, putting asses in seats. The WWE and the rest of the professional wrestling world, lots of Japanese promotions, AEW, Impact Wrestling, lots and lots of promotions all over the world. And they're like, if you can put on a good match for
Mhm.
6 to 25 minutes, go do it. Go
Yeah.
do the same thing the guys are doing. The only difference is you have estrogen. Go.
Yeah.
And I would like to
Well,
see that. I would like to be able to see things like the WNBA and hockey become a bigger draw. I
yeah.
really would. There's no
Yep.
reason that you can't have a professional women's baseball league on the same level.
Yep.
Or and like women's soccer in other parts of the world is doing really well.
Mhm.
Anyways, we've gone into the weeds here.
Yeah,
I
we
think there's
did, didn't we?
there's a really
Isn't that
really
what it's
good
about,
show.
though?
It is, and that's part of the reason. That's why podcasts are conversations, right? It's not sitting here asking you a bunch of questions. It's questions that pop up. We get off into the weeds. However, I do have one of your former female players that would love to come on and have a chit chat with us, and I think
Mhm.
we can really get into this. And it's probably going to be several episodes. It's not the player that went to Harvard,
Oh.
but I can work on that. We'll see what we can do. We'll have to get into your Rolodex here. Get into your little, I don't want to say little black book because that's got
Rosters,
weird
my
connotations.
rosters.
Get into your rosters and see what we can do because I've had a little bit of success reaching out when I have reached out to some of your old players. But
Mm,
anyways, the hockey season, whether you're male or female, or somewhere wherever, not gonna get into that. It's a long chunk of life. You
mhm,
have school, you have family, you have relationships, you have pets, you have
mhm,
your own personal health, you have your family's health. A
mhm.
lot of these things can really get in there, especially if you're dealing with, kids that are in the throes of puberty where, they're the love of their life they've met. She's 3 lockers down, oh my god, or he's 4 lockers away. We shared the table at lunch, and all of a sudden he hates me and she hates me. She's gone out with somebody else and they're
Mm,
heartbroken. It's it bro it's been 3 days. It's
mm,
been 3 days. Can you dial it back in here?
mhm.
um what are some of the big hurdles you find that come in off ice that really have impacted players over the years? I mean, there's also been I don't want to be naming names, but there's also been incidences where family health and deaths in the family
Yeah,
have really impacted a player's desire throughout
yeah.
your time.
Well, they affect a player's performance for sure, and I mean, there's a whole life out there, and, you can be adversely affected by any of the things like I said, going to school, a girlfriend, yeah, I don't have any money, I'm not being paid, I gotta find a job, I've gotta call my mom and dad and ask them for money and no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here playing hockey for free or on a scholarship, they don't have money, and, I mean, there's just limitless things, and as a coach, empathize, and try to keep them on track, like, the best that you can. So some of the worst thing in 17 to 20-year-olds is girlfriends. Oh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that can be really distracting. You're really glad you have one day, and the next day, she's talking to somebody else in the hallway, and you get jealous, and now your focus isn't on preparation for your hockey game that night. Although you do know that there's going to be 4 scouts in the stands, and they may not, they may be there just looking specifically for
Mm-hmm.
you. As a coach, I try not to let my players know, but I used to get lots of calls from scouts, either NHL scouts, central scouting scouts, league hire scout. Let's say that they're coming in and they've looked at the stats on this player and that player, and can you give me an inside line? So
Well, I
that
mean,
goes
and
back to
it
further knowledge, and yeah, and
listeners, go back and check out our Jeff Courtnall episode. That's exactly what happened. And you
yeah,
could
it
see
was.
that, for years, I mean, decades, really, Jeff didn't know the other side of the story. And you could see on the video, if you're going to check out YouTube, you won't notice it as much on our audio profiles, but um you could see the moment where Jeff goes, "Oh, shit." That was oh my god, because you gave him the heads up,
Yeah.
right? And you said, "Hey, if this guy messes
Mhm.
with you," and I'm paraphrasing here,
Yeah.
take him out. Don't let him
Well,
mess
yeah.
with you tonight.
Drop your
Don't
gloves and
let
just
him mess
start
with you.
swinging and get out of
Right.
there as fast as
Yeah,
you can, and he
right.
looked great in it. It worked out really well,
Well,
and
it
it got him a
definitely
chance that he didn't have.
and
It
that
got him a
definitely seemed
chance.
to be, for lack of a better term, a TSN turning point in his life because it got him a chance he didn't have. His next year playing there, he put up a lot of points
Mhm,
and a lot of fight minutes protecting his brother,
mhm.
and he would go from there to 17 NHL seasons,
Yep,
right? Like,
and he'd have done more had it not been for injuries. I mean, he was
yeah.
Jeff, he played well at the beginning, or you wouldn't have been there. But for me, as I think I said this in the podcast anyway, his best years were just coming. His years in Vancouver were good, but
Mhm.
his years in
Yeah.
St. Louis after the trade back to St. Louis, I thought they were phenomenal years. Like
Mhm.
uh, had he been playing there for 17 years, he'd been in the NHL Hockey Hall of Fame, I'm sure. And and then it was cut short
Yeah.
due to injury. And but yeah, it's
Yeah.
I used to get those kind of calls all the time. In the good old days when we were at our level, we were developing players uh, primarily, I thought anyway, we were developing players to move them on to the Western Hockey League and NHL careers because I
Mhm.
had really good success in my dealings with the Western Hockey League. And the secondary is if the kid is not a particularly, if he's a particularly good student and a good hockey player, but maybe not NHL. You couldn't see NHL in his future, but that's a mistake trying to judge that. Uh,
Mhm.
then you were pushing, you were calling up universities and saying this is our roster and these are the players that are interested, and they're, and then they always ask academics because I mean some schools in the states are very very much interested in the player.
Mhm.
And if he
Very
can
much
get
so.
into the school, great. We'll keep him here until he can't play. But other schools, you go to for the education. You go to Harvard for the education. I've had 4 or 5 kids go to Harvard. I've had 3 or 4 kids go to Yale and Princeton, and I've had kids go to Michigan, and I've had them
Mhm.
go to Western Ohio or Northern Ohio, who can remember, and in Minnesota, and then other kids go to Division 3 schools where they have to pay, but they get an education. And I've got doctors and physiotherapists and kinesiologists, and I don't know why hockey players all want to be kinesiologists, but I
You
have
know what?
some amazing stories about those.
I see that with a lot of athletes because there's something about they've probably had some sort of encounter with needing that kind of assistance and just found that, well,
Mhm.
this is a good path and it keeps them
Mhm.
around sports.
Well, they loved it. They got into
Yeah.
it, and they, for one reason or another, they're not going to be an NHL Hockey Hall of Famer. But I might as well get a good education because
Mhm.
doctors pay pretty good,
And you
lawyers
know
pay
what?
pretty good, engineers pay pretty good. So,
As we discussed with Danny, he had a great career in Europe.
mhm,
A great career. So a lot of kids focus on, I need that Stanley Cup. I need I need this particular jersey. I need that. And I don't want to turn this into a don't get your hopes up sort of thing, but
no,
there's when you do the math, you got to be the top of your game. So be great because you can to steal your line. But somebody's getting that roster spot. Why not you? I just saw that quoted from on this week's NXT show by Becky Lynch. She's the one of the ladies that main evented a WrestleMania. She's a top superstar to one of her young proteges who she had a match with on TV. It's like
mhm,
somebody's getting the spot. Why can't it be you?
yeah,
So
yep,
don't
no,
let the math deter you. Don't let the funneling deter you.
yeah,
Somebody's getting that spot. Somebody's
yep,
getting it. That team's
yep,
going to hire somebody,
yep,
right?
they are,
There's no
and you
reason it can't be you.
there's no way that somebody can tell you that you can't. Just the
Hmm.
same as there's no way that somebody should tell you that you can.
Hmm.
You just put the amount of effort, you use the, the the very best of your ability, skills, and you look for opportunity. And you get the right
Hmm.
opportunity. I mean, I know lots and lots of guys that would have, you know, been bigger stars in the NHL other than they were playing, as a center on the Edmonton Oilers.
Um, you know
I
what?
got 2 pretty good
That's had a couple of guys do okay from that position,
Yeah.
but I understand. Like there may not be, they may be a top performing star. They do not have. I'm going to say
Yeah.
the infrastructure around them that
Mhm.
pushes the team to that level, right?
I
Like
think
you can score 5 goals in a game all you want, but if the team loses 10-6, it's still hard to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And go ahead, look at all these, go and look up your favorite player. There's really good odds. They're not from the big city.
No.
Sidney Crosby is not a Pittsburgh native. Wayne Gretzky did not grow up in Edmonton. Cam Neely did not grow up in Boston,
Mhm.
right? And those are just the North American players.
Yep.
Let's look at some of these guys that are from out of the country,
Yep.
right? Let's look at our Russian friends. Let's look at our Finns. Let's look at our Czechs. There's no reason you can't get there. Um, we're in the weeds. So you mentioned that relationships on a player can be difficult. Um, have you seen players improve because that school crush showed up at the game tonight?
Oh, yeah. You
Or
see
have you
that
found
too.
that can be a big distraction for them because they're too busy looking in the stands for, you know, the cutie
The
from
next
the
game that
locker?
she doesn't show up at.
Yeah, or
You mean the
he.
one that,
Yeah,
she you almost have at time feel like you've gotta go out and make sure the girls are coming, make sure they have tickets and a personal invitation because every time they're there, they play really, really well. They get tired of him because, the coaches told them that they got a curfew and the hockey game the next day, and they go out and date somebody else, and the kid comes there, phones her up, and she says, "Oh, I went out with Roger last night and he's just destroyed." So yeah, you
yeah.
deal with it on both ends, and it's
That's
just stay focused, son.
yeah, I could definitely see like that's a very tricky tightrope to watch, and it's very short term. There are
Yeah,
other long term things that can go
yeah,
sideways. I mean, family illnesses, deaths in the family. Have you encountered some of
yes,
these things? I would imagine over the year you would have had to. I know there is one big one in there, and I don't want to get into that particular one, let alone drop
thank you.
names. But I mean,
Mhm.
there's stuff that will just,
Yeah.
and it's
No,
not just a game performance thing. It's a life altering moment. And sometimes you that's it. You don't have,
mhm,
it could be, I've lost this parent or I've lost this sibling or family member, and I don't have time for this because I got to pick up the slack over here,
mhm.
right? Or
No,
I really need this because it's fun and it's my outlet and it's the only place I'm happy, but I don't have time. I'm not. I'm in my head
I
worrying
can't
about
stay
everything else.
focused. See, our whole preparation, I mean, for most athletes is being focused, on the game and what your job is, and as all sports go on, knowing something about your opposition. If your mom has cancer and
Hmm.
she's lying in a hospital, and you know that you've been told that she isn't going to be there your whole hockey season. I had a few of these cases. It's These kids are scared to answer the phone. They're scared to take messages because usually a message coming in is, and they're doing everything that they can, but I began to realize that that's a big problem, for them, and For sure, they're getting support even from the sick parent in terms of, "Son, this is what you wanted. This is what we want for you." I it still is a huge impact. I've had
Mhm.
a few kids go through that, and I've had a few kids go through, a phone call and their parents have, you know, died in an accident, or one of them has died in an accident, or a sibling has died in an accident, and, that's bigger than hockey life.
Mhm.
But hockey life can be a focus for them if you can keep them, in my mind, keep them not focused on the game itself, but on why are you feeling so bad about this? There's been a lot of good things that you've experienced in your life because of your mom or your dad, and this is what they wanted for you, and their happiest day is when you're happy. So,
So it's kind of for lack of a better term, win one for the Gipper sort of situation where it's like they wanted to see you do that.
succeed. Yeah.
They so I can imagine that's I'm really lucky. I haven't had to deal with a whole lot of that because, well, I'm talking to my dad right now.
Yeah.
Um, and it was my mom
Hopefully you
sending
don't have
yeah.
to for a while.
Yeah, and it was my mom that was ball busting you via questions earlier on.
Mhm,
So I've been fairly lucky with that. I mean, I it's not that I haven't lost people, I haven't lost friends.
mhm,
I've had some as you know, and as I mentioned to Jeff when we did that show, I the mental health aspect is super important because we've had mental health very serious mental health aspects run through my household
mhm,
in particular under this
mhm,
roof that I'm sitting in.
mhm,
And I know I couldn't go to work. Like I was a fairly reliable employee. I was kind of counted on, but I was distracted. It took weeks and weeks to get over the fact that I was like, okay, this is the way life is now. I am constantly worried about the text on my phone, the call that's coming in on my phone, what's going to happen when I am at work this day, especially because when a lot of these were happening, I was working at random job sites all over the lower mainland and Fraser Valley. So I could be in Chilliwack one day, I could be in West Vancouver the next, or Richmond, or, Surrey or Burnaby or anywhere. And
mhm,
it got to me big time. It was really tough to just deal with going to work. And there was a lot of understanding with, just not just my boss, but my coworkers who had all gone through similar things to some degree. And to be able to put it out of my head long enough, I couldn't sit around the house. I absolutely couldn't sit around the house. It would have made me crazier. I can imagine that my performance was not top notch. In fact, I know a few times that I had been it's like, "Hey, did you know this and this and this that we're not done?" I'm like, "Oops. Yeah. Um, oh, oops." So I can imagine that a player or even a coach, like let's not take I don't want to take the coaching aspect out of this because life happens to coaches too. And to
mhm,
some degree, it's more likely to happen to a coach just because they're going to be older. I mean,
mhm,
the odds of having to go through a life-threatening injury or sickness or a terminal illness or a death in the family goes up the older you get. And I can imagine that gets into everybody's head. And at the same time of I have a job to do, I need to be at the rink coaching. I have a commitment to my team, I need to be there playing. This is also my happy place. But if I'm at home, I'm stressed because I can't do anything. If I'm at the rink, I'm worried that, you know, I'm missing something at home and I'm going to miss that call. Because, I mean, you can't have a cell phone when you're on the ice. I mean, it's not like playing goal with a
Oh, yes, you
5-month-old
can.
strapped to your chest. Oh, you shouldn't.
Oh, but a 5-year-old
I
strapped to your
I would
chest,
I
that's a good
would
story.
would love to see the otter box that survives a couple of interesting hits or shot blocks, but that's a whole other thing. I'm sure they got a couple of stories with that. But the happy place is tainted,
Yeah.
right? This is, and for a lot of it, it's not necessarily a job because you got to be way up there to start getting paid for it, but it's your happy place. You're hoping that this becomes your job, but at the same time, are you at your best? Probably not. You're probably really not. You might find, and this goes also back to, sometimes people are just wired to, F you in the face of failure and come back harder. I can see that same sort of wiring is no, they needed me to do this. So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it. I'm going to get these 2 hits. I'm going to make that tackle. I'm going to walk out of here with, I might not get a hat trick, but I'm getting at least 2 assists on this one, or I'm stopping every shot I can coming at me, and Lord help you if you're on my side of the blue line, it's your ass. Um, it have you ever got to a point with, and this is obviously, I very seriously doubt you would do this because the kid from third period I was at last game isn't here. Have you ever had a point where you've had to sit a player down and said, I know you want to be here, I know you want to play, I need you to just sit tonight? Have you ever had to take a kid out and just bench them because it is not the time for them to be back on the ice because they are just in that much of a state, but they need that happy place feeling. They need to be where the rest of that stress can't touch them for 2 or 3 hours.
Yes, I have, and got hated for probably 2 hours while the
Mm-hmm.
game was going on, but in most of those cases, they've come and said, "Thanks, coach. I needed to defuse because anger issues or just general sadness and depression issues." But you know, um, I would do that. I've done it probably more times than you would have thought. Basically, because I spend so much time evaluating my hockey players, not only physically but emotionally, because I want them to perform at the. You never know who's looking in a hockey game, and
Mm-hmm.
if you're at the lower levels, you need to perform well because the guy that may be able to pick up all that he sees in you is something that they need at the next level, and if you're not performing at as close to as well as you can, those are things that are opportunities that are lost. But yeah, I've had kids come in and say, well, this happened and that happened, but I want to play anyway. And I said, well, this happened and that happened. you know you're not playing. I know you want to, and I know where your heart is, but I think that you just need to defuse or, find a way for yourself to, I mean, the game is, when you're trying to perform and compete, you're under a lot of stress because not only, for yourself, but for your team. And if you can take that away every once in a while, I mean, my hockey seasons were anywhere between 60 to 70 games long. So, I mean, to miss one or two because, you're actually endangering yourself from either. The other thing is physically hurt. The kid is physically hurt. Coach, I've got a
Mm-hmm.
broken arm, but I can play. No,
Mm,
you've got a
right.
broken arm. You can't play. You're not playing. Oh, well, it's only a sprained shoulder. Oh, well, the x-ray shows it's dislocated. So, you're not going to be playing for a few weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a great advantage for the CHA and minor hockey to come back with. It used to be left up to the coaches and teams to take an injured player and say whether they could or couldn't, especially in the cases of concussion, where we all had to report all injuries and that you had to have a doctor's approval, and that had to go to a hockey official to approve before you could get back on the ice. That took a lot of heat off of decisions that I used to have to make on my own. And
Hmm.
it's pretty heartfelt. Hockey players coming, oh, I've only got a sprained wrist. Well, he can't pick up a hockey stick, but even with one hand, the player is good enough that he could probably make an image. Danny Hodgson was one of those.
Hmm.
Craig Redmond gave him a stress fracture with a slash across the arm, and Danny
Right.
was bound and determined he was going to play. Oh, I'm going to play. I don't, I look, coach, I can almost hold on to my stick. I'm playing. Oh, no, you're not. But I'm going to miss the
Well,
playoffs.
and then
Oh,
you
well,
gotta
I
you gotta
actually
kind
missed the
of
playoffs.
you gotta balance the okay. You can almost hold on to your stick. So if the puck lands on your stick, what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
Do you have that mobility to pass it to the guy that's open? When you do that, are you going to have the oomph behind it to get it past the defenseman that's waiting for you to do that because he knows your wrist is messed up?
Not even
Are
so
you
much
going to
that.
be able to take that pass that's coming in and put enough oomph on it to get it past the goalie before he has a chance to pivot and get the glove or the pad out?
See, that's all there, but even more for me, if you do this, does it make the injury worse?
There it is. That's what
Or
I wanted you
that's
to say.
that's the one that's the one that bothers me the most.
Yep.
Like, son, I appreciate you want to go and do, and if we could wrap it up with a band-aid and stop the bleeding, then maybe you can play. But you have a serious injury, and you're a 17-year-old, and an injury to a wrist, that you ignore and keep playing on can ruin any opportunity of you ever
Mhm.
having a future in this game. And that was always my priority with what you have. If it's a mental issue, if it's a severe mental issue, then you got to get help.
Mhm.
I'm not a psychologist. As much as I've done of this, I'm not. I'm not a doctor. I'm not certified. So therefore, you have to have the help that you need for the sake of your future.
Yeah, 'cause I mean,
Because
even
your
best case
future isn't
scenario,
in this game tonight.
in the best case scenario, the mental health aspect of it, the physical
Mhm.
health aspect of it, how many NHL players right now are in their 60s and 70s? You're not playing the game forever.
No,
You're just not.
if you're playing past 35,
You're really
you're
lucky.
extreme.
You're
You're
really
really lucky.
lucky,
That's right.
right? Like, I mean, let's look at the length of Jeff's career in the NHL was extraordinary.
Oh
17
yeah.
years? Are you fucking kidding me? And I know I try not to swear on this
It
show, but I
doesn't kid
really want
me because I knew
it.
what his
Well,
determination
no, and
level
that's
would.
fine. But I try not to swear on this show because we are aiming this towards a younger audience. But let's be honest, you're at the rink. You learned to swear in the same dressing rooms I did at probably at the same age. Um, but I use
Not
it for
much missed in the
emphasis.
dressing room.
Yeah, I use it for emphasis.
Yeah.
Danny, it's like, oh, he played 4 years in the NHL. It's like, yeah, but he played 17 more in Europe and did really
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And there's all sorts of stories like that. You're leaving the ice somewhere in your mid 30s if you're lucky.
Yep.
If you're
Oh, if
really
you're
lucky.
very good, you're leaving in your
Yeah.
mid-30s because you gotta realize I don't know the recent up-to-date stats, but the last time I looked at them, the average length of an NHL career was under a year. That's
Mhm.
everybody who
Sounds
signs a
about right.
contract to play in the NHL is under a year.
Yeah.
If you play 5 years, you've done pretty good. If you've played 10 years, you're in the elite in terms of opportunity to play. Anything
Absolutely.
more than that is,
Yeah.
extraordinary. So,
And you see
yeah.
that, I mean, the if you look at the football stats,
Mhm.
they break it down by position. It's like, "Oh, no, running back doesn't play longer than this, or lineman doesn't play
Yeah.
longer than this, if your quarterback doesn't play longer than this." And I've seen those stats before.
Mhm.
I've read the books, I've listened to the podcasts, and it's not that I'm seeking them out. It's just that this person was interesting. I'm reading their book or I'm listening
Mhm.
to them on a podcast. Um, you got to think of the life while it's going on in the hockey season. If it means you got to sit down because you sprained your wrist, well, do you want it
Mhm.
broken? Like a sprained ankle is worse than a broken ankle. I know this
Yes.
because we've had several of them in this house, and the people that had it kept taking the damn boot off, and it turned into like a 6-month affair where it's
Mhm.
like, well, it's still sprained. Yeah, because I caught you with your boot off. So what are you doing when I'm not home?
Yeah.
Like if I could catch you at 7:30 with the boot off, what have you been doing since I left at 8 o'clock this morning? Um, and that's injuries. Mental health, same deal, because you get in your own head and bad things can happen. It can lead to a lot of outside the rink problems. It might be the injury led to I can't sleep unless I have a pain pill because my
Yeah.
wrist hurts, and you get caught up in that. Or I met this, we'll call it a waitress, and I'm gonna go have a beer after the game because she's working. And then you get it used to having the beer after the game, which turns into more and more, and those kind of problems develop. And you get into dark places of I missed this shot. It rattled off the crossbar. It, you know, it was in overtime. I rattled off the crossbar. The other team picked it up. Everything fell apart. There was a breakaway and we lost, or things like that. And so the injuries, the mental health, the personal relationships. I mean, obviously you can't replace somebody that's terminal or has passed away suddenly.
No.
It is up to you to figure out how to live the rest of your life. In particular, going back to what we started here on, the injuries. Do you want to be able to play with your grandchildren? You might not be thinking about it because in your early 30s and you've been, bouncing around the NHL and whatnot, and you're just starting to have kids, but you're not thinking far enough down the road of, I'm going to have a permanent limp if I thought I was the hero of the game. I came back on for that playoff game and my leg was broken and and then your leg permanently never
Bobby
healed.
Bond.
Right? And
Yeah.
there's all
Yeah.
sorts of stories like that. The hero stories of injuries, in any sport really, but in hockey, it's like, oh, I played with a broken leg. I played with a concussion. I went off the game and I demanded to go back. It was only three cracked ribs. So I came back and we won the game. Well, how are your ribs doing? Well, I got 6 broken ribs now. No, I thought you had
Mhm.
3 cracked ribs. Well, I did. And then I ran into Zdeno Chara in the corner, and that didn't go well for me.
Mhm.
Like, there's a would you say it's a responsibility for a coach to know when to go, look, off ice is in a really bad spot for you right now? Might be an injury, it might be,
Mhm.
a personal life problem, might be a health problem with somebody in the family or close to them. Would you call it a responsibility for a coach to be paying attention to those things?
Absolutely. Somebody has to be.
Mhm.
Hopefully, it's parents and best friends and close friends or relatives. But the bottom line, if it's going all through that, and the coach recognizes that there's a problem, he's got to say something. Maybe there's not something that he can do other than, okay, listen, you need to get help or you need to go to the doctors, and you're not coming back to the ice until that's been satisfied. In my
Mm.
estimation, it's an observation, and a responsibility should be all the people around you. But sometimes the player themselves or the person themselves can talk their way around all their friends.
Mhm.
And ultimately, if the coach is seriously interested in the well-being of one of his players, I mean, he has to he has to step up and do at least a minimum. A minimum is, son, you're not playing tonight because I saw you limping and you said you're ready to go, but you don't look ready to go to me.
Mhm.
So that's my responsibility. And If you don't take that responsibility, then you have to take the responsibility for any consequences that come from that.
Now, what about the coaching staff? I mean, we're a little over a normal hour time, but I just wanted to get into this. Say the coach is having a bad day. Where does that
No.
where does that lie with, and for let's drag it into, I mean, sometimes it's like your marriage just hit the shitter right before Christmas. You found out your wife is just done with you and everything else, or it was a long time coming. It's just, or you've lost your job suddenly in a layoff. Where does the coaching now? I would usually it's not one dude coaching straight away. At what point is it, the assistant coaches or the GM, or I mean any of the other staff really got to, and it's probably harder with a head coach. It's probably almost feels like a mutiny, where it's like, look, you ain't doing this tonight.
I don't know.
You've had some bad news, and I know you've been here because you couldn't be at home for whatever reason, and I know you've been sitting upstairs in the bar, or I know you've been sitting in your car. I know you're not in the state for this. It's not, I don't want to blame it on, inebriation at any point, but just some factor of where's the other staff sort of need to step in there.
If you're going to do that, you have to be a close personal friend
Mm-hmm.
because you are jeopardizing your position. Other than for one position on a team that I always kind of listen to, and that's your team trainer. If my team
Okay.
trainer came to me and said, blah, 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 then, I would seriously consider that he's telling me the way he sees it is. If it's a close friend or somebody, and you become pretty close friends when you're on
Mm-hmm.
coaching teams, but there are coaching teams where, some guy is doing specific analytical things that you might not become
Mm-hmm.
pretty close friends with. Uh, I would, I'm sorry, a little old school in here. You better be my friend if you're telling me I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
In terms
I don't think
of
that's old
how
school. I think
prepared
that's
I am.
I think you either got to be a really good friend or somebody that barely knows you at all, just because in life
Yep.
that's the way it is, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
the trainers,
You don't
that's
want
an
the coach who
interesting.
is really working hard, to impress the ownership or your general manager, and that you're the next head coach. That guy, well, I kind of looked forward to having him
Yeah.
confront me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the concern, and it's probably there's two sides of a coin to this, I would guess.
Yeah.
Is concern is very easily considered a power play as well of, I want that job, I want that contract. Or, in the case of maybe somebody coming in overhead on the executive level, is I want my guy in that spot because
Hmm.
I left this team. The trainer's an interesting one. I never considered that, but there's no power
Always the
play there.
trainer for me.
There's no there's
Always,
no
yeah. His
there's no
concern is for the
reason.
players. His concern
Yeah.
is for you too. If he's seen something, he can sit and explain it to me, and I will listen.
Mhm.
Even the trainer is my best buddy in the dressing room. When I'm not there,
Mhm.
and there's times you just don't want to be in the dressing room because the last thing all your kids need is to see your ugly face all the time, be it happy or be it sad. Give
Right.
them a break. But the trainer, handing out towels, putting on band-aids, putting on rubs. I've had quite a few trainers who also did physiotherapy, especially
Mhm.
with Major Midget in the last, 8 years, 8 or 9 years. Our
Mhm.
trainers were excellent, and they were usually studying to be kinesiologists or
Mhm.
something like that, needed work experience, and they bring their knowledge of medical to it, including, I got to tell you, you know, I never saw a massage on a pro hockey team, but as I got up in hockey, I saw a massage therapist come in once in a while if they were required. We had on our major midget team a guy who could do physio, uh, and he was awesome. Charlie, if you're listening, you know, he was excellent. He could do everything from tape a stick to give you a massage for a pulled muscle that might help
Hmm.
the recovery of that. And he would come in and work with players on game day that weren't even playing. And
Oh.
that kind of dedication too is, I mean, all the NHL teams have it, but as an instance, on our major midget team, because of the coaching and general managing that we had a yoga instructor, we had a fitness and conditioning instructor, we had a dry land instructor, we had a physiotherapist who also happened to be our trainer because he liked to sharpen skates and tape sticks, and I mean, uh, God, I don't think I ever got any. I don't think I ever remember anybody ever taping my sticks for him. But I mean, the players pull the tape off their stick between periods and do them.
Yep.
Usually before a game, the trainer's doing it, but I didn't score on that opportunity, so the players are blaming the
Oh, it's
tape
the
and they
tape.
pull the
It's
tape
yeah.
off and
It's
put new
I
tape
taped it
on.
wrong, and that's why I hit the crossbar. Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Blame the tool.
Superstition. Now
Yeah.
there's a subject for you.
You know what? We can absolutely get into that. But yeah, the trainer bit is very fascinating to me. Have you ever seen the show Ted Lasso?
No.
I'm gonna
Sorry,
recommend
I should
you.
have. I know I've
No,
heard of it.
well, here's the thing: is so Ted Lasso is a show about an American football coach and his longtime assistant coach that get a job coaching football in London.
Oh, really?
Not the same kind of football.
Oh,
And the reason I think you would enjoy it is because he is learning a brand new game from the bottom up.
the
He's got
coach too?
the coach is learning bottom up. The two coaches came
Wow.
in, didn't know what he hired to coach football, hired for a very specific reason, and that sort of plays out. But it is his method of coaching and his the way he chooses to do, and I'm seeing a lot of similarities with what you've talked about over the last couple of months, with the way he's chosen to learn more about the player
Mm,
and work with that. So it's him and his assistant coach out of Oklahoma, I think it was. Great show, 3 seasons, um, short seasons. I'm gonna recommend you check that one out. I will find a link for
okay.
you somewhere else, but I
All right.
I think down the road, maybe discussing Ted Lasso and the way that approach to coaching, because a lot of this really seems um, kind of on point to what you've really been preaching for not
Mm,
just 7 episodes now, but decades. And
40
it's
years.
also funny, very funny.
Well, I've
So
never
I
been
will look that
considered
up.
funny, but
I will see if I can figure out a way to make
all
sure
right.
you can link that. I know you're up in the middle of nowhere there. So it's not always as easy, but it does stream, so we can figure that out. We're at about an hour 20 here, and we've gone on to the weeds a couple of times. We have a few extra subjects we can cover, and I think I understand why I always considered my brother to have brain damage. Because I mean, if you told me he took a couple of street pucks off the dome at 5 months old, now I would know why.
Yeah, your brother was one of those kids who would never say no. I've seen him
Well, at
say
five
take
months
some
old, he couldn't.
incredible hits, but yeah, 5 months, yeah. I'm not sure whether Daryl made that save or not. So
Yep, that would.
anyway,
But yeah, I kid,
good
Greg. If
man.
you're listening to this, I'm just giving you the gears. Don't worry about it. So thank you so much. It's been fascinating as always. We will get back to these people. Hopefully next week we'll see how everything goes with the illnesses around my house and what time we have. I know that your personal assistant is taking a little mini vacation here next week, so
Yeah,
tech
she
is not your
is. I
strong
have
suit.
to cook. Tech is not my strong suit, neither is cooking.
That's
Cooking
fine.
for me, unfortunately, is hamburgers, hot dogs, and craft dinner. So
Is that because
none of
there's
them
no?
are on my diet.
That's because there's no KFC up the road anymore.
No, we don't. I don't get to stock in KFC anymore. Listen, Matt, thank you very much. Remember, everybody out there, Be great because you can.